So welcome to Add-on TWIG, a little bit about custom theming in Drupal 8, new to Drupal 8. So first, who am I? I was with the St. Louis Drupal group up until last year, so this is kind of coming home a little bit. I've moved around the country, but I've been using Drupal since 2010. Currently work at Purdue University. Fortunately, I don't use Drupal there. I actually work on top of Joomla. I know, boo hiss, but you know, I do Drupal in my spare time and enjoy the community greatly. So you can catch me on Twitter. My handle is @asharpzinc, and on D.O I'm just a Chris. Slides are available. There's presentation I just uploaded, so let me know if there's a problem, although I probably can't fix it at this point. I keep the link down there for the first couple of slides, but they will eventually go away, so don't wait too long. So what we're going to cover here. We're going to cover multiple areas. The TWIG is in the title, but you know, by itself, not contained within a Drupal theme, that doesn't do much help for the community of Drupal. So we're going to start with just our review, or for some of you, an introduction on TWIG syntax. I say a review because there have been tons and tons of presentations about this already, going back to DrupalCon probably 2013, maybe in fact 2012. So this stuff, the syntax I'm providing you is not incredibly new. But what I'm trying to add to this is showing it in actual theme development, because all the presentations and slides that I've seen, they kind of just give you hints of where this might be useful. But as we'll see later, for this presentation, I actually worked up a simple theme just to get things going and understand about TWIG development in Drupal. Second topic was going to be just general theming concept in Drupal 8, what's different than Drupal 7. And we're going to sort of tie it in together at the end, showing examples of this together. So first concept is TWIG syntax. If you're at all familiar with Drupal, you're used to PHPTemplate, which allows you to do pretty much anything PHP has. And that comes with a lot of problems. You know, you can try to do SQL in your templates, which can cause a lot of headaches, but I've seen it. So this sort of abstracts away that concept and introduces this new TWIG language, or new to Drupal. So some changes, most of them aren't dramatic. One of the real reasons I wanted to for its presentation is to show that it's really easy if you have like a Drupal 7 theme, or and you want to go Drupal 8, or you're just starting out. It's not that big of a challenge to port it over if you have a Drupal 7 site and you want it to theme it in 8. A lot of people hesitate, like, oh, well, I gotta learn this new language and everything. But this will hopefully dispel some of those fears. So as we see here, comments are formatted in a number of different ways, but obviously they all have the same closing and opening tags, the bracket and the pound sign. You can put it in one line, you put it in multiple lines, or you can have really long comments, including your doc block type style at the bottom. You can also set variables, so it's not just a simple language that can't do anything at all. I mean, it has good complexity. So you can set simple variables like today, Saturday, or you can set arrays. You can even set chunks of text. And sort chunk is just a variable name. So printing, pretty self-explanatory. 2 open brackets, 2 closed brackets, prints the variable in between. and you can combine that into array elements. The way I've seen it most is using the dot notation. I believe that the brackets also works, but still kind of going back to the way that you did in PHP, which, the dot notation was a lot cleaner and easier to read. Also for debugging, dump, and you can dump a variable or dump whatever variables are accessible currently on your template. Also provides logic, your basic conditionals. So first example just tests if something is true, and we're just outputting straight text. Notice we didn't use the brackets because this is text and not a variable. Second one compares it against a string value. And you can also do ternary operations, which is the last example you see there. Loops are also available, so you can loop through the entire array, similar to if you've seen any other JavaScript or other languages. You also loop with counting. Second one just outputs the current index variable. And within the loops, you also have these 4 items at the bottom showing what options are available to you. So you can get the current index, you can find what the first is, the last is, and the length, and you can do comparisons within the loops themselves. So one really cool feature is this concept of filters. Filters allow you to modify the text that you see in between the different comment blocks, or not comment blocks, but the different tags. So obviously in the first case, we're saying we're using a filter uppercase, and what would output in this case is the whole thing in uppercase. We do the same thing with variables. And the second example is just showing it in pipe format, so you can pipe it directly into uppercase. So if the variable contained the whole thing in upper, so you get the same exact results. A lot cleaner. You have to be careful of what's in the variable. We'll see an example of that later. There's a complete list of these TWIG filters on the Essentio Labs site. There's at least 20 of them. Uppercase is probably the simplest to explain. There's also pipe length, so you can get the length of the string if you need that. Drupal also extends that a little bit and provides a little bit of Drupal-specific filters. So, is it just like Drupal 7? Not exactly, but there's a lot of commonality with it. So, this is a good example set we're going to work through. And I'm just going to quickly... This isn't going to be a complete live demo because I'm not crazy. But I'm just going to explain the area that we're working with. So this is just a simple entry page for a blog. Some of the things that you might see on a normal blogging site, you have a very most featured one, which is sometimes the most recent one. And then you have a section of 3 here, which are also highlighted, and then you sort of do run out of the next most recent blog post. Obviously, it's all example content, except the images are obviously from various DrupalCons. And also, you can set up views to output different formats. So in the most left, we see that, or most right if you're looking at it, we see the most commented posts, and then also different topics or tags that are associated with the post. So the reason I'm showing this real quickly is just to outline the areas. So all this is kind of built, configured with views. If you're not familiar with views, if you're new to Drupal, in Drupal 8 it's part of core, yay, not an additional module you have to download and install. Basically, it's your query builder. So it allows you to structure out exactly how you want your queries to be built. So the first section that we see here, this can be done different ways, but I just created a single view for getting the most recent post, getting the title, getting the image, and getting the text below it. This featured block is a separate block, just getting 3 that have been marked as featured. You could probably also use sticky or something like that, or promoted, which is core to a Drupal node. And the same thing, as additional 6 posts.
Did you say promoted is in core? No?
Promoted, I think it's always been in core.
Okay. Oh.
Just a flag on the node content type. So, and then 6 additional runouts of the site. So, and also just quickly going over the blog view, we're basically just looking at a single node at this point, or a single blog post runout. So this is the example we're going to be working with for the remainder. I've also just uploaded the code to this theme to GitHub real quickly. I just did it in the last hour. Just if you want to review anything that I'm sort of notating between all these or take down later or whatever. It's not like it's a theme I'm building or need contribution on, but you know, it's something you can look at. It's not completely 100% finished. It's not tested in all browsers, but it is there, and it probably actually wouldn't work without all the configurations in views that goes on behind the scenes. So take that for what you will. So I'm just going to quickly run into the configurations to set up this, and I won't spend too much time on this because this is more of the background stuff, the site building stuff besides actual theming. So in this particular case, we added the blog taxonomy. Taxonomy is basically a container of terms which can be attributed to a node or a blog post in that sense, and then you categorize them. So instead of using the default tags one, create a different one called blogs. You probably also use the default tag one if you're not going to use it for anything else, but if you have a site with multiple things going on, maybe you have blog tags, maybe you have news release tags, etc. But by default, tags is installed automatically, so you can run with that without having to do this. I did update the articles content type. By default, when you install Drupal 8, you get the articles content type pretty much in the fashion you see it right now. The only addition is I added that featured post. It's a Boolean checkbox, yes, no. So not too much there. A lot of the work is in views. None of these are actually really, really complicated. We see in this case, the configuration for the most recent post, which was that big image that we saw on the demonstration. So basically, not much going on here. We're just displaying the fields. We actually just limit it to one output, which is a little cut off that you can't see there. But down by where you see pager at the bottom, I would just, instead of full pager, you'd set it to a specific number of items, and it'd be one item. Additionally, I installed a few modules, responsive image, which we're going to see a little bit in action later on, to allow you to resize the images dynamically based upon device size. Path Auto, just because I like clean paths. Highly suggested module, still in development, as are most things for D8. And Devil, or Devel, which allows me to create the content real quickly and then just assign the images I want. So all those comments that are on the posts, I was able to just quickly output through that module. So if you're familiar at all with Drupal 7, your likely place that you had put your theme was in Sites All Themes. Now it goes in the root themes directory. So no drilling in to add your theme. I highly recommend, but not required, separating contributed themes versus custom themes. Contributed themes are different than the themes that come with core directly, and there are a few themes that come with core directly. Classy, Bartik, forgetting the rest, Stark. But if you have multiple themes going on your site, and some of them are from other people and you have your own, good to separate them out. So I've placed it in custom. Within the internal structure of this theme, you see various similar stuff that you might have seen before in Drupal 7, CSS images, your template files, some images that are associated with the main part of the theme, and then also some of the new stuff that you'll see, the YAML files, and et cetera, which we'll get into. So the first definition is the info YAML file. Could be short or long. In this case, it's fairly short. We're just defining the name, what it is. It's a theme. It's for Drupal 8. It has a short description. The regions at the bottom are just the different areas of the page that we can assign blocks to. So in this case, we have a short list where it's just, mainly header, content, that featured region, sidebar, footer. Libraries is something new and might be confusing, but this is where we're linking to our CSS files and our JS files. It'll make more sense when we go on to here. This is another YAML file that's required in the directory. This really just defines what the specific files that we're looking for in dependencies. So in the previous, we said in libraries, CSS, and global CSS and global JS. So you can actually sort of organize these CSS and JS files separately. So you can have more than just global CSS. You can have front CSS, this specific section of my site CSS, whatever you really need. And the same thing with JS. So basically, you're including this group, and then the specific libraries file says the individual files which are actually associated with that. This is where we start to get into the actual template process. Most of this copied kind of from the core files, which are, like I said, available by just pulling out of core. So we see just this defines just your basic HTML entities, your whole wrapper structure, and then starts the body, which page would take over, which we see down there for the most part. We'll probably not get too much into this one, but we'll touch page a little bit in these demonstrations. So this is kind of defining the structure of our site, the various wrapper divs that get things line up as they need to. And you start to see some of the TWIG stuff sort of shining through, where it's outputting these variables and includes some logic. Styles are important, obviously. This is a fairly short file. It starts out with common stuff, and I haven't included the entire file here because CSS is not really in the domain of TWIG learning. But this uses basic media queries to push around blocks or push around regions of the layout and resize them and what have you. So mainly I was only targeting kind of two sizes, one large screen and one that you consider a mobile device, which actually that's kind of a phone at that point at 500 pixels nowadays. Not even an iPad. But and also our JS file, pretty short, not much going on there. Basically, I just, for the mobile icon, when you click on the hamburger menu or the menu icon, it just flies it out. And that could be done with CSS solely. if you wanted to, but a quick JS file to toggle and open and close the menus, what this does. And that's the only JavaScript that I'm adding. So without the theme, I believe this is, well, unstyled is a little misnomer. This is, I believe, classy, which is kind of developed as a base theme for you to develop on top of. One important point is everything I'm showing you is built on top of core without being a sub-theme to any other theme. So we're not learning some other system, some other theme that we're developing off of. This is integrating with core elements. So, you know, there's other resources like the classy theme, which is included in core that you can review. Those are far more defined, has all the options and you can build off of or not. I mean, it provides all the regions that you might need and work with. But if you didn't have a theme enabled, I believe classy is the default theme, but I could be wrong. Bartik might be. But it will look something like this. Even with all our views configuration, you get a basic run-out before you install the theme. Theme installation is very similar to Drupal 7, but if you're not familiar, go up to Manage and Appearance, and then you should have the ones that are uploaded to your site. The one step I skipped here is you have to install the theme first. So on it, themes not installed are at the very bottom. You just click the install button, and then you can, once you do that, you can set as default, which makes it your default front-end theme. So we see the one that we're building with towards the bottom there. So one very useful thing about TWIG is the ability to debug some of this stuff. Since it's not closely tied to PHP, it's just a layer on top of. We may need some additional debugging information and additional information about caching and learning. So since it's sort of being compiled in a loose sense as PHP, a lot of it gets cached automatically if you don't alter these settings. And you can see the defaults are exactly opposite to how I have it configured now. And you see all the recommendations are do not use these in production environment. Yes, they will slow down your site. No need to, once you have everything working, to not cache stuff, but those options are available to you. Debug true is a really useful one that we'll see, I believe, in the next slide. The D.O node for this, explaining this, is at the bottom. And there's excuse me a second. Don't want it parallel. All right, so the debug option, what this is really cool is, especially with, I found with views, you're always like, oh, what's that view's name again? Why do I name this template file to actually get it to work? As you see, it's providing the suggestions for you automatically. This is a screenshot of the source, view source of the HTML file, that front end, that main blog page. So you see different suggestions for what will work for those view files. In this case, block 6 was actually that large block up top that had the large image. It's also, you know, delineating areas of output and also other theme hooks. So it's really useful if you're stuck on what affects what without having to even really install an additional module to do it. This will output it for you. And I think make a point. This file is actually in site's defaults. It's a YAML file for services, and within there, there's a TWIG block. So that's how you actually do that change. You'll probably have to flush your cache after you do that, but it's pretty cool without any extra overhead in terms of adding additional files to help you debug. So the views template files mainly for most cases, I copied from their locations in core and then overrode whatever I needed to. In this specific example, I didn't do much. I just added this one wrapper that I needed for structuring. But all your different levels of use templates are available in that directory. So one part of Drupal theming, image styles has been around since I believe D7 as part of core. So basically it allows you to define which files, which sizes go with what profile names. So in this case, I've added a few image styles to the defaults. Defaults are large and medium, which are below, but I've also added this full width and this full width low, as well as this block runout. So the difference between those are mainly the pixel width of the image. You can see that full width is a pretty large presentation size, whereas low is half its size and width. I'm not constraining the height on this, but with image sizes, you can define it to crop to a certain size and many other settings. This ties into one of the additional YAML files that we saw in the main directory. So this allows us to sort it separate from the media queries, but can be also aligned with them, define different breakpoints for images. So basically, as you change your display width from a large computer to a mobile device, you probably want to consider loading a different size image, because if I load a 1900 wide pixel on my iPhone, that's a lot of wasted bandwidth. Well, not individually a lot, but they do add up. I've seen on a lot of sites. So this allows you to define at what width some of these breakpoints might happen. And you'll see that this is going to be tied into the image styles that we just defined previously. And this is the place we see that. So this is the responsive image module. It's downloaded with core, but not enabled by default. So all you gotta do is enable it. So basically, we just it allows us to just simply define a label for this. In this case, it's featured, and then we can define different sizes for different widths. So, and you'll see, those exact names that we gave, narrow, wide, mobile, are what it's pulling in, as well as a fallback. So in this case, for wide, which what I deemed as 900 pixels wide screen or larger, using full width, and other stuff below that is smaller width. So yes. So it goes back to the reason on why you might want to do this. You see the difference in size there. No reason to load the 1900 pixel wide on a mobile device. Save about what, a quarter per image. If you're running a large blog gallery or photo gallery of sorts, then those really add up to your load time. I missed the slide included in this deck. This can be configured from the content type area. So if you go structure, content type, when you're configuring the display of the node for the individual image field, you can choose responsive image as opposed to a default image size. So you choose this featured, which is the label for it, as the default. I'll add that slide later if you want to download. So that's where you actually assign it to the image, which I assigned it to the display of this image. This is just the run out of the individual node. So I just edited the default display for the node. This also will potentially work with views. This is the configuration for the views output for that image. We change responsive image as the format or the formatter, and we choose our responsive image style, which is back to the label that we were configuring. This is a similar configuration that you'd see on the individual node display, whereas this is working in views. But currently there's a bug with this. It's in the issue queue and is being worked on. I believe it's at the needs review stage, not sure. But it's getting fixed. So right now, if you actually do these settings, you'll get a nice big old white screen. You can find out more about the issue there, but I'm pretty sure that'll work soon, because that is a quite major bug in connection with views and responsive images. So we've talked a bit about configuration, and now sort of tying this all back together. So one simple thing is the output of logo, which we saw on, I believe, the page HTML. Yes. So we see it right there. I've entered it into the directory. I don't have to provide a path because it knows that it's expecting logo in the path. However, it's expecting an SVG file. So without any additional work, unfortunately, I get a broken image. Could provide an SVG, but I had to pay at this point because it took me about a minute to create that image online using logo generator, and they didn't export SVGs. So, boo-hoo. There's a solution to that. There's an additional file in the root of the theme called blogdemo.theme. Blogdemo is the theme name, of course. So basically, this should look familiar to anybody who has worked in Drupal 7 for pre-process functions. This is sort of how you do similar things. So obviously, this just replaces SVG and with PNG with what it's expecting. So once you have that, it loads up correctly because it's looking for now logo.png in the root directory, which is there. Just some examples of these TWIG concepts being used. In the node HTML, we have different class names, and you also see some conditional operations happening here. So if this is an internal Drupal function, so if it's promoted, assign its promoted name, and then it outputs these classes right here. So that's sort of how it's handling some class assignment to the various HTML structure. And you see how this outputs an example. So you can see some of the logic that can be done. This isn't even that complex of stuff, but it's defining it all in one spot, quickly to assess and modify as necessary. We also see both loops and conditionals as an example. This template is associated with one of the views that I created. Block 1 is actually the run out of 6 most recent posts that we sort towards the bottom of the page. I had to modify this a little bit just to get things kind of working the way I wanted. That run out wrapper is consistent with most of the ones I displayed, but the real reason is to just do some tests on logic. So in here, obviously we see the looping structure up top, and then it's also just testing if the index of the loop is divisible by 2. If it is, it's even. If not, it's odd, and it assigns that class name down here. And then in the CSS, I could say if it's even, I'm probably going to do break after that image, clear both in this case to wrap it around, because the way I have those images, they all float left, and they would somewhat run out depending on size, but I wanted to break after the second one on large displays, and actually after every one once the small one, once you get to a mobile device. And yes, I know you can do this with CSS quite easily, but it does nothing to do with TWIG, so it's a good test. And you see those being highlighted. So both looping and conditional logic is in there. And yeah, that's the output. So it correctly does odd, even, and there's the CSS, and I probably will add it to the bottom to break it down. Arrays, sometimes difficult, especially in working in views files, drilling down into the various depths of the renders arrays that Drupal provides. So this is a simple example of outputting content from the image field. So in this case, I wanted these outputs wrapped in a certain way. So copied the template over, modified it, and included it in a certain wrapper structure. So this is outputting an individual field, which is more similar as if you're creating custom fields for types, if you're assigning ones which aren't native to Node, whereas title and body are usually native to Node, so you see field dependent before there. You can use probably the dump to dump field or field image to see what you have available. Might white screen depending on your memory, because as we all know with views, some of these structures or arrays are quite large. One other thing I want to point out, this little escape false and end auto escape is a little bit of a hack. By default, you shouldn't need that, and the template should work fine. But on the specific type of template, this code ends up being displayed out completely. So it gets essentially all escaped, which isn't what you want. So again, another issue that's being currently worked on and hopefully should be resolved soon. So we see filters being in use. In this case, we're just uppercasing the title of the content. Again, I believe this is still in the view output, and we see that similar top part with uppercase in there. But you have to be careful with this stuff. As we see, there's side effects here. It actually uppercased all the actual definitions here. So be careful of if it includes tags or not. If you probably want to just use on straight text, but you can probably get around it in different ways. And this is an even worse example. I'm using that similar filter, except that I'm using it in a block format, and this actually escapes everything and causes a nightmare. So this is an easy use where this one works fine, or you're just using straight text with upper. Without is another useful filter. So content is the main node content. So without these items, it will output, and then this is part of the default node template where it just outputs these links and comment sections separately. So once we remove them from the main output, in this case, we're adding an additional one, field image. For some reason, we may not want to display the image. Just a simple way to remove stuff and different portions of the individual content block or any block. Another concept, which I didn't introduce in the TWIG review, TWIG blocks. Not the same as Drupal blocks. Not related at all, actually. So in this case, this is the output for the individual blog post node. And let's say I wanted to adjust this content type. I wanted to alter this section up here because I don't like the way that that's formatted. What I normally do is I copy the entire node template and rename it, and this would be for the content type article. This would be a correct naming structure. I copy the entire thing, and then I change the one area which I cared about down here. A little bit of wasteful, a lot of extra code, not the best. So this actually helps with the solution. So what we do here is within the base template, which is node.html, we define this thing called block, and we're naming this block author. So we're saying this is what this block author normally contains, and it says submitted by author name on date. In this case, we want to remove submitted was the only case we're related to do. So when we get to the node articles template, it's a lot shorter, because basically we're saying we are extending this original template, except we're going to take this block and we're going to replace it with this value. So in this case, we removed the submitted and add some extra text over there. But you can imagine that you can do a lot more complex examples. This is a very simple example of replacement, but I mean, that versus 2 lines there and then some additional lines there. That's very powerful and very good for code reuse and not having to duplicate the same things over and over and over again. And this is the example that we see at the top with it working. Some additional resources on TWIG and etc. Morton DK had a great session at DrupalCon LA regarding TWIG and a lot of the theming behind it. He's one of the contributors towards the theme as well as just theming in general in core. There's also some great additional resources from Lullabot. That 2-part series is expanding. I don't know how many parts he's doing, but he's put out 2 already, and there's a future coming. And some additional stuff on TWIG in general and theming. That's all I got. Any questions? Well, thank you guys. Anything else we're going to do with it here?